Yo, what's good, everybody? It is your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What Ifs, whatever you want to call me. And I'm back. This is going to be a little bit different. This will be a bit of a one-off. I'm not sure if I'll have one shot in the title or anything like that, but this is a bit of a one-off. And it's not going to necessarily be a story and more like a bit of a rant. Now, it is in a what-if format. Obviously, as you can see by the title, this is what if Deku started training from the start. And it's just something that I really wanted to talk about, and something that frankly I kind of reference quite a bit in some of my videos, where I believe Deku could have started either training or at least working out or kind of doing certain things to better prepare himself for specific things that obviously occur or don't occur in the story of My Hero Academia, right? Now, I've had countless arguments about this topic, but I thought, hey, let's do a full video on what I think would have happened if Deku did start training far earlier on in the story. And spoiler alert, I mean, when you have one of the most powerful quirks in the entirety of the world, I mean, preparation is one hell of a thing. So, let's talk about what would have happened if Deku started training from the start. Now, let's start from the very beginning. Everything that Deku started doing initially was an amazing thing, and probably way more than what most people would have done. But it mostly attributed to the fact that he was a massive nerd. Like, nerd. Now, nothing wrong with that. I'm a massive nerd, and nerds are arguably the best people in the world. And yeah, no one can argue with me. You will be arguing with a brick wall. Now, I have nothing wrong with him being a nerd. I think it's great that he's a nerd, especially without a quirk. He obviously lacks a quirk, and he does a ton of studying with his or with other people's quirks, analyzing them, figuring them out. How do they work? What's their weaknesses? What's their strengths? What can they do? Stuff like that. It's all beneficial for Izuku, and that's a big thing that I feel in general in terms of Izuku Midoriya that he benefited from pretty massively. Now, did he utilize the information that he was gathering to its largest extent? Maybe not, but it was still very beneficial. Now, let's go back to the idea of Izuku Midoriya at a very young age being told that he was no longer or did not have a quirk. Now, his mother would obviously cry, tell him that he's sorry, or tell him that he's sorry, or she's sorry, excuse me. And they would have this whole thing where Izuku would remotely feel like maybe his mother believes that there's no way he's gonna be a hero. And this is where I think things get misconstrued a little bit with some people that watch My Hero Academia, because they are under the assumption that Izuku still feels that he can't be a hero, and that's why he wouldn't train. Now, that's just completely false. Izuku believes he can be a hero, and even later on, when he's older and when he's in middle school and stuff like that, he heavily says that he's going to be a hero, that he's going to go to UA. I mean, literally in middle school, they have a whole thing where Bakugo and Izuku are the two people that applied for UA high school. So if he knows he doesn't have a quirk, he knows he doesn't have a quirk, he knows he's at an inherent disadvantage, what should he do? Now, for starters, what I would have Deku do, just flat out, is I would have him train way earlier on. Now, I'm not saying bodybuilding, I'm not saying working out crazy, no, none of that. But we know a lot of people at a young age would start training in the way of martial arts at a very young age, right? We know people that talk about maybe working in martial arts or kind of training in martial arts at the age of like 7, right? There's some people out there that train that young. Now, learning fundamentals, learning how to fight and stuff like that. And I honestly feel like Izuku should have been doing this from the very, very start. Now, you could chalk this up to blaming his mother. Maybe his mother felt like giving him this or giving him the opportunity to train in martial arts would have kind of sent him down the wrong way and would have kind of put him in a scenario where he believes he can do it and he can make it even though he doesn't have a quirk. Now, I understand that, but Izuku himself, as someone who really was kind of optimistic about basically being a hero, I honestly think he should have flat out just started training and working or begging his mother to put him in karate classes or anything you could think of, any martial arts, judo, jiu-jitsu, anything, right? Because everything would have been beneficial. I'm not saying that he could have walked into the UA entrance exam without a quirk and won and passed, because that's just probably not true. But still, all of these things would benefit him. And at least in his mind, he has preparation that would allow him to give himself a chance at going into a hero school. On top of that, I could possibly see Izuku utilizing maybe weaponry. Maybe he would learn how to utilize firearms, or maybe he would utilize like swords, katanas, or stuff like that, because that would obviously massively benefit him as well. But how much would this actually change to the story of My Hero Academia? Now, for a lot of the story, at least in the beginning, right, from the sludge villain and stuff like that, it wouldn't change much, right? The only thing that would change is when Bakugo, for the most part, gets captured and he runs over to Bakugo and tries to save him. Maybe he'll have a little better time just because he knows how to, kind of fight to a certain extent, but still, it would be basically the same thing, right? It would be basically the same thing or extremely similar. And I know what some of you are probably thinking about the whole All Might situation, that Izuku would still probably hear that All Might believes he can't be a hero, blah, 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 and stuff like that. But I don't think that would change. I think he would still hear that, and I don't think it would change Izuku's motivations either, right? And also, on top of this, before we continue on, I want to say, if he learned how to fight, he would be able to fend with Bakugo a lot more, maybe even gaining more respect from Bakugo, and or kind of being a better friend with Bakugo, because Bakugo kind of saw him as useless. So maybe him having martial arts or being able to defend himself would have helped him in the long run. But obviously, we're all thinking, okay, so what happens when we get to the time that he obviously gets One for All from All Might? Now, when All Might gives him One for All or offers One for All, they would talk about, okay, well, we have to train, right? We have to do 10 months of hard labor. Now, this Izuku has already been pretty much trained up, right? Not to the extent that he would have after the 10 months, but pretty damn conditioned, right? He's in martial arts, he's in karate, jiu-jitsu, judo, kickboxing, whatever you can think of, right? He's been experimenting in it all, and he's been training with swords and different daggers and stuff like that to help him for the near future. So he's pretty damn fit at this point. Like, he's pretty conditioned. So in terms of the 10 months training, I could see it lasting maybe 5 months, maybe 7. But even if you give it to where it's like, okay, he has to go 9 out of the 10 months, I still see this as a massive win. And the reason why I say that is because, well, Izuku finished his training like a day before or even less before the UA entrance exam. And he was able to, and he got One for All, but he didn't know how to use it. And frankly, I thought it was very, very, very dumb of All Might to give a kid his powers without him being at least a tad bit kind of prepared, right? He should have been prepared, right? At the end of the day, he should have been. Even if All Might didn't know that his quirk would have been more powerful within Izuku Midoriya, right? But I still think, even if you force me to give him 9 months instead of like a 5 month to clean up the beach, or like a 7 month to clean up the beach, you still have a full month to actually train with One for All. And I must admit, as Izuku Midoriya being a nerd, you would think he would figure out how to use full cowling at least sooner than normal, right? Of course, you give him a little bit of slack in the actual My Hero Academia verse, because at the end of the day, it is all brand new to him. But if you give him a month of training, a month of him kind of working out and helping himself and trying to figure out One For All, I could definitely see him learning how to use a percentage of One For All, right? He would be able to use a percentage of it, being that maybe it's like 5% to 10%. And if you, let's say we give him 5 months extra to train One For All, we could be talking about a totally different Izuku Midoriya. We know how fast he learns. We know how quick he can pick up on things. Izuku would benefit massively from having One For All way earlier on and be able to actually benefit from having One For All, like in general. Because once he goes to the UA sports, or not the UA, excuse me, the UA entrance exam, while I'm skipping arcs, but the UA entrance exam, he would obviously have massive benefits throughout this. He now has full cowling, and let's have it nerfed, because I don't want to go too overboard, but let's give him 5% of full cowling, or 5% of One For All, and he could utilize it to destroy robot after robot. Now, in terms of the Ochako Uraraka situation, obviously he would still try to save her. Now, he could obviously jump up and break and shatter his arm with 100%. That is an option that he definitely could do, and it would do exactly what it did before. Or he could use 5% of One For All, which would give him superhuman-like strength, and he could kind of get rid of the rubble that's on her, grab her, and run away. And there you go, right? Done and dusted. He saves Ochako, and he gets a pretty decent score in the UA entrance exam. Now, obviously, this is where things can be a little bit opinionated, because you could have the opinion of, okay, Izuku would have this much One For All, or this much One For All, or Izuku would have 0%, which I would personally disagree with, just because I felt like if you give Izuku enough time, he would eventually figure it out. Which, another thing, we're introduced to Izuku like he's some nerd, extremely smart, great at analyzing. You would think he would figure out how to utilize One For All at its highest capacity that he possibly can, almost in a matter of days, weeks, maybe. And Izuku's very good at analysis, so you would think he would be able to break it down for himself and kind of push forward the tempo of learning One For All. And this obviously leads us to him getting into UA, and he would be, ranked pretty well. I wouldn't say he can destroy things like Bakugo can, because I just don't think that's the truth. I think he's still a little bit behind what Bakugo would be in terms of physical capability, or kind of destructive capability is the better word for it, for sure. And this would lead us to the first quirk assessment. Now, the quirk assessment would be, it would be better for Izuku, like far better. And I think that's not even like, that's probably an understatement to say that, because yes, he would use 5% One For All, probably to throw the ball, and it would be kind of a weaker throw than usual. Like a good weaker, because I know, yes, he used one finger, but he also used 100% of One For All. So he used his whole hand or his whole arm and used 5%, which would probably be equal to maybe like half, maybe less, maybe like 25% of one finger 100%. But still, I think his scores on everything else, would be amazing. His scores on his speed test, his side steps, his grip strength, all that stuff, all of it would be so much better that it would make up for it, and he'd probably be a little above the middle of the pack, maybe toward the top 10, maybe even closing in on like the top 7. And Izuku would be accelerated massively throughout this, because frankly, when we continue up and up and up, like we continue going through these training sessions, like a hero versus villains training, Izuku versus Bakugo would be a very simple fight to call, right? We saw that Izuku was able to counter Bakugo in the original My Hero Academia. Imagine this version, who is trained in martial arts, who has at least bare minimum 5% of One For All. He'd be able to absolutely destroy Bakugo in a one-on-one fight. I talked about destructive capability. Yes, I do believe Bakugo at this point would have better destructive capability, but in terms of an actual fight, in terms of not facing robots, Izuku would school Bakugo in a matter of seconds. I mean, Izuku already had martial arts and probably had his fair share of fights with Bakugo, but now he's even amped up to a superhuman level, or at least to a mild superhuman level. So I honestly could see him kind of destroying Bakugo for the most part with martial arts training and 5% to 10% of One For All, right? Now, how would this change the USJ? Now, I don't really think that it would change that much in the USJ because, well, unless you give Izuku 20 to 30%, he's not going to really have this massive impact on the USJ, in my opinion, especially not the Nomu, right? He didn't have impact on the Nomu in the first place, but in terms of fighting maybe like a Shigaraki, he would be able to handle Shigaraki a lot better because of his martial arts kind of skills and his capabilities that he's learned along the way. Now, would this kind of stop Shigaraki entirely? Most likely not, but it would better prepare Izuku just in general for this encounter, right? Him escaping across the lake, he would definitely be able to do that, because if he had to use 100% of One For All, he would and could, but he would just shatter one of his fingers or something like that, right? He would just hurt himself to do it. But his body would be way more prepared to utilize closer to 100% of One For All. So if he does maybe crack his finger with 100%, his finger probably would not be as broken. Maybe it would be extremely hurt, but not as broken type of thing. So yes, there is benefits there, and there's things that he would definitely benefit from. Now, I'm not saying Shigaraki, the Nomu, all these things, I don't think they will, be defeated and captured here, right? I know in a lot of my stories I have OP what ifs where they do have that, but I just don't think that would be the case. But throughout this time where we're just training and stuff like that, and the USJ ends basically the same way, Izuku continues to ramp up his ability to utilize One For All and full cowling itself, maybe getting it from 15 to 20% now, and going into the UA Sports Festival, right? That would be massively beneficial, and I could see him kind of going the same way as usual, but I think he would still struggle with someone like Todoroki, where frankly he would need the full power to kind of blast through the ice and stuff, right? Now, you could make the argument that he would be able to basically blast through the ice with kind of the controlled power of 20%, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for me personally. I think that could be a possibility, but nonetheless, I feel like if you end his kind of fight here and you end his UA Sports Festival here at Todoroki, or the fight with Todoroki, I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think it's completely fine. I don't think it's like a massive thing, but I do think Izuku still gets the fire stuff out of him, gets him to use his fire side. And I think it's pretty much the same stuff happens past the UA Sports Festival, and then going into the internships and him going with Gran Torino. And this is where like real training begins, because this is where he begins to learn even more from Gran Torino about utilizing One For All. And I can see him amping up One For All like immensely here because of the help of Gran Torino, and now he's finally getting some solid training in. So maybe he amps it up from his 20% to now a 30 to 35%. And we're talking 35% at right before Stain is a pretty impressive feat. Like 35% of One For All is pretty wild right before Stain. And at the end of the day, I think what a lot of you are probably getting what I'm saying here is that if he was more prepared early, he would definitely be able to maintain and also just be a better hero even earlier on. Now, I will say this because I know someone's going to say it. Obviously, he didn't know he was going to get One For All. but he still wanted to be a hero. He was dialed in on the idea of wanting to be a hero. So if you're gonna do that and you want to, hey, like if I lived in a world of My Hero Academia, which obviously I don't, and I was quirkless, and in my mind I'm saying, oh, I'm gonna be a hero, like no matter what, I'm gonna be a hero, then you better put your money where your mouth is, and you better do everything you possibly can to actually be the hero you want to be, right? So in this world, obviously, that we're talking about right now, this is what Izuku did. Now, how would his fight with Stain go? Obviously, it's very simple to say that it would be a lot easier, right? His fight with Stain would be a lot simpler because, well, he's pretty damn decent at martial arts, Izuku is. He's pretty good with a weapon, not bad at all, but he also has a higher degree of one for all. He still has the help from Todoroki, so whatever happened initially, he would just do a good little bit better, right? He would do a good bit better. Now, I'm not going to say the Stain fight's an easy fight, because it's not. It's far from an easy fight, but Izuku is far more prepared in terms of hand-to-hand combat, in terms of speed, in terms of strength, all of that stuff, right? He's a lot better suited for this fight with Todoroki to save Tenya Ida. And then, obviously, this would lead us into going back to UA and the final exams. Now, the final exams, we know it's Bakugo and Izuku versus All Might. And in this kind of world, I truly believe that Bakugo and Izuku would have a slightly better friendship. Now, the reason for this is because Izuku was learning martial arts and was learning how to defend himself, so he was looked at as not as useless as he would have been looked at in the first place, right? He's not going to be looked at as like the same Deku, right? Now, Bakugo still probably would think that he is a Deku or still is annoyed by him and stuff like that, but at the same time, Izuku would have defended himself and fought back, gaining some of that respect from of Bakugo, even if Izuku probably didn't really care about gaining respect from Bakugo because he just saw him as kind of a friend, right? Because that's what Bakugo was to him, at least in the eyes of Izuku. Now, how would it the fight between All Might, Izuku, and Bakugo go? Now, you could argue that it would either be the same or a little better on the side of, obviously, Izuku, right? Izuku is better at martial arts, right? He can fight a lot better, and he's a lot more skilled. And you could even argue that he would be reaching close to 40 to 50% of one for all at this point, far earlier on than he ever would have in the first place, right? So he's reaching that point, but on top of that, All Might isn't really skilled at martial arts or at fighting. His kind of power is just literally that. It's just power. It's just flat out strength. So, of course, All Might would kind of be, not necessarily, I wouldn't say exposed, but he would definitely be shown why martial arts, why, combat and combat, like true combat, is really important to know. Because maybe that's something we'll talk about in a future what if, on like maybe I'll do like what if All Might knew like, proper martial arts, because a lot of All Might's fights aren't really martial art based fights, right? It's a lot of just like heavy punches, like I'm going to try to like hit you really hard. Like that's kind of what All Might is. That the Detroit of Smash, right? Boom. And with Izuku, that's where he's gonna benefit, where his technique is a lot more proper, and this is where a 50% of one for all with an actual punch, where he's turning over the punch, he's actually kicking properly. Maybe he's leg kicking All Might. Maybe he's exposing certain things that he knows would actually hurt in general. So that's what he does. He exposes All Might in a way, right? And at least in terms of a hand-to-hand combat prowess. So he would definitely benefit from knowing martial arts and being higher in terms of the full cowling one for all threshold. And he would help Bakugo pass that exam exactly how it happened before. Now, we can even talk about going into the forest training camp, But even the Forest Training Camp wouldn't be, I wouldn't say it's that much different, right? We have kind of like the same thing. Maybe Izuku versus Muscular is probably an interesting one, because Izuku probably would have to extend his boundaries, and he might actually have to use 100% of One For All, like he did before, because Muscular is really durable. But Izuku also isn't just throwing punches to throw punches now. He kind of understands the way of utilizing martial arts. But let's just say that he has to still probably stretch himself there. But like I've said before, he's better prepared. So even if he stretches himself to 100%, he's still more prepared to use 100% than he ever would have in the past, right? In the canon version of it, he's not even close to it just yet. And this version of Zuko would be way more prepared and probably wouldn't have his whole like arms completely shattered and broken because of utilizing, right? He'd probably be hurt pretty bad, but he wouldn't be to that degree and to that level, right? Now, Izuku obviously would go through the motions of saving Bakugo and stuff like that, yada yada yada. A lot of that stuff wouldn't really change. The defeat of All For One, still by All Might, probably wouldn't change. You could throw in a thing where maybe Izuku is powerful enough to kind of swoop up a Shigaraki, kind of take him out, or kind of like, defeat the League of Villains if you minus All For One. He is strong enough at this point. 50% of One For All would probably be plenty to kind of handle that business. So technically, you could make the argument that the arc ends here. It just depends on if Izuku's rescue of Bakugo leads to an actual fight, right? If you have Izuku fight the League of Villains, I honestly think this version of Izuku would have his way with them, like destroy them, make them look like a freaking joke. Now, you could also make the argument though that we might have to wait for a war arc, because maybe Shigaraki and them, they get out. Maybe they survive, but All For One gets kind of, put away in prison. And then we have, this version or different circumstance that we're now dealing with, where we're going to be still going into a war arc eventually. But also, I want to make this clear, a war arc that Izuku would be more prepared for, right? So let's talk about going into, provisional hero license. How much more prepared would Izuku be for that? Well, he would be way more prepared, like way more prepared. He would be at least at maybe 55 to 60% of One For All. I mean, we have training. We had a Forest Training Camp arc, right? We have what is it called? Kind of like when they're super moves, right? When they do their super moves, they have that training. And then they have the provisional hero license. So they're massively prepared, or at least Izuku is even more prepared, continuously upping and upping and upping One For All. And he continues to learn more and more martial arts and learns more and more about hand-to-hand combat. And it only just benefits him even more, right? And this all leads up to him passing the provisional, which obviously wouldn't change, and then lead him to obviously going and taking on Overhaul. Now, this would again be a scenario where Izuku's path to beating Overhaul wouldn't change that much, right? There's a possibility where we're talking about Izuku and Mirio taking on Overhaul together and actually beating him before he even kind of goes into this crazy catastrophic state. And then Izuku wouldn't even need Eri to actually maintain 100%. He could basically take on him with Mirio, and they would be able to stop this whole scenario where Mirio loses his quirk and stuff like that, right? I honestly think with more power, Izuku would be able to do just that and be able to stop what would have happened in canon, right? I honestly think that he would have shut that down pretty damn quickly. And this is a completely different version of Izuku in terms of strength. And we don't even know the possibilities in terms of he could be learning the other quirks by now, right? That could be 100% a scenario where his progression in One For All kind of mirrors that as well, and he starts learning Black Whip way earlier on. He starts learning Smokescreen way earlier on. All of these other quirks way earlier on. So if he does that, I mean, it's only going to benefit him even more. That's all it's going to do. It's only going to benefit him in the long run, especially for a so-called war arc, right? A so-called, like, you know, arc that is definitely going to be a determining factor. And that's what it was going to be. And obviously we still have some other stuff, like we have the Class 1A versus Class 1B, more training for Izuku. We have the whole Endeavor Agency, which technically Sir Night-Eye is not dead, so we probably wouldn't have Izuku go with Endeavor. He'd probably still be with Sir Night-Eye, but either way, it's still like good training, good preparation. And then we have months before the war arc is supposed to happen, which Izuku's going to have more training to perfect Black Whip. Maybe if he gets Smokescreen, maybe if he gets Fa-Jin, if he continues to progress the way he's progressing, we're talking he could be at 100% of One For All without his body shredding itself by the war arc. Yeah, I'm serious. I mean, that's what I believe preparation could have done for Izuku, right? Everything is cause and effect, right? And having somebody train earlier on, be even slightly more prepared to get One For All, even though I know he didn't technically know he was going to get it, but being more prepared in that scenario because he was thinking to himself, how am I going to be a hero if I don't have a quirk, right? Oh, okay, well, let me work harder. Let me be stronger. Let me learn martial arts. Let me learn how to use a weapon, right? If he did all these things beforehand, and then by, you know, the grace of All Might, he was given One For All, well, then he would be so prepared for this scenario that even coming up on the war arc, he would be even stronger than what he was in the canon. And by a considerable amount, by the way, because we know when he eventually becomes Vigilante, he would kind of use a pseudo 100% of One For All, right? No using pseudo, he would have 100%, right? Like, that is the reality of it. Maybe Izuku would even kind of don a new form himself, kind of like what All Might has, where All Might kind of buffs up and, you know, becomes more of a bigger person. Maybe he somehow dons that, right? I don't know. Probably not. I'm not a big fan of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, Izuku would be far more prepared, a lot more prepared, would have the quirks, like a lot of his other quirks that he would eventually have mastered or prepared for this scenario. And the war arc, I think, would end here and now. I don't think Shigaraki gets past this point. I think Izuku would be too prepared. I think Izuku would be too prepared. And I think him just training, literally just training, or at least working hard or learning martial arts from the start would have led to something like this. Would have led to him being so prepared that a lot of the things that eventually come up, he wouldn't struggle with, right? Izuku, at the end of the day, I will say this again. If he started this journey knowing that he didn't have a quirk, that the chances of him being a hero were practically zero, right? But he, in his mind, which he did, I want to make this clear, he still believed he could be a hero. Because I know some arguments are, well, he was told he couldn't be one, or he basically thought he couldn't be one, so that's why he didn't train. It's like, well, then why did he still kind of reach out to UA? Why did he still feel like he could be a hero? I mean, if you wouldn't just like flip that switch back on and off, right? You would, as a child growing up, you would feel like, oh, I'm going to be a hero, right? And so if he decided when he was younger, like, I'm going to do everything I possibly can, even if it's not when he's like super young, because I understand that some of them aren't, you know, some people aren't going to be 7, 8 years old and that conscious of what you're doing, right? You're not going to be like, oh yeah, you know what? I should do this. I should do that. I should do this. But if he's like 12, right? And saying, okay, I'm going to learn martial arts. that would even put him in a place pretty similar to this one, even if he didn't start martial arts at the age of like 7. But we know how much he begged his mother to do something, right? Like, we know how much he wanted to be a hero. So imagine he begged his mother, put me in whatever I gotta do, right? Martial arts, stuff like that, keep whatever, right? And begged her. Knew that this is the way for him to actually be the hero, or be his, be my hero. And he did it. And he started training in martial arts, maybe mildly at the age of 7 and stuff like that. But then he started ramping it up when he got a little older, and he started learning, working hard, working out, training, sports, whatever you can think of. And then All Might graced him and said, I want you to be my successor. Someone who's already prepared, someone who is already kind of reaping the benefits of the training he's done throughout his life. And now he's ready. And now, given One for All, he's already more prepared. He's already has multiple months, or at least 1 month extra to prepare with One for All. And this is a big jump for Izuku, because, I mean, at the end of the day, I already explained it, that him being more prepared in this scenario would allow him to jump way further in the future than he would have in canon, right? He would be able to utilize One for All to a certain extent way earlier on, just basically from the start. Now, with that said, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about the topic. I know this is kind of old, like My Hero's like already over and stuff like that. And maybe this video should have been made a long time ago, but it's something that, like, to this day, I feel like we still talk about. And I felt like, hey, let's make a video called What If Deku Started Training from the Start, and break down what I believe would happen throughout the story. And yeah, I know this was a very quick what if. I mean, this is an entire what if in a matter of what we're at 37 minutes. Now, if you guys want to see more stuff like this, more like one shot, just one go, kind of talk about specific things, how I think things would go. Maybe we'll do something for like a more overpowered what if and do it in a more faster succession. Please let me know. I would love to try this style out. This wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed ranting about this. I think it's a good thing, or a fun thing to rant about in this scenario. But yeah, I would love to hear what you guys have to think in the comment section. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And yeah, that's all I got to say. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Later.